And welcome back to the Birchwood Convention Centre, and of course marking 30 years of South African democracy, but also taking a look at our rights, human rights, and how far we've come. How well do you think we have fared as a nation with something that is deemed to be the cornerstone of our democracy, which is of course Chapter 2 of our Constitution, the Bill of Rights? Have we as South Africans individually done enough to go and establish what is contained within that Bill of Rights? Do we know our rights? Are we able to assert our rights? And of course, there are institutions that are set up as Chapter 9 institutions to help us assert our rights as South African citizens. And I'm joined now by one of the commissioners of the South African Human Rights Commission. I'm joined by Commissioner Philile Ntuli. Thanks so much for coming through, Commissioner, and happy Human Rights Month, because March is Human Rights Month here in South Africa.
Thank you, Sakina, and thank you for inviting us, and happy Human Rights Month to you as well.
So it's an auspicious occasion here today, marking 30 years of South African democracy and human rights that came along with that democracy. As the South African Human Rights Commission, you are, of course, at the center, so to speak, of ensuring that South Africans' human rights are actually maintained. How do you think you fared? How would you assess the South African Human Rights Commission's work over the past 30 years?
Firstly, Sakina, let us start by congratulating the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development for facilitating a platform of the nature of this conference for us to deliberate, to reflect on the work done thus far in promoting human rights, and we look forward to engagements in the next 3 days. As the Human Rights Commission, you are correct, we have been at the center of the defense, the promotion and the protection of human rights in the country, but also outside of the country as we relate with other national human rights institutions. In the past 30 years, we would say that much of our success has centered on the outcomes of our trends analysis reports. The complaints that we receive have in the past 30 years shown us that South Africa has grappled with what is so-called identity politics, identity rights as per Section 9 of the Constitution, race issues, sexual orientation issues, and we have been quite successful in promoting and protecting also the right to expression. Some of the work we are looking at in moving forward now is issues around socio-economic rights as we move and as we exist within a crisis, a water crisis, health crises, and other socio-economic rights crises in the country.
So to that point, South Africans are entitled to, as enshrined in the Constitution, the right to clean drinking water. Simple right. Yet many South Africans are deprived of that particular right for various reasons. So as the Human Rights Commission, have you conducted any studies into this particular issue? Because, without water there is no life. And a lot of money has been spent in this country by the government on making sure that there is reticulation that takes place, but that doesn't ensure that water comes out of the taps.
Yes, Sakina, we are highly concerned as the Human Rights Commission at the state of the delivery of water across the country, especially in rural areas. The state and the rate of development of rural areas in particular is in a state of want. As the Human Rights Commission, we have shifted our focus in the last 2 years to concentrate more on local government as the coalface of service delivery, looking into socio-economic rights, including the right to water. You are quite right. Water is the source of life, and without water we cannot exist. The government, particularly local government and water services authorities, have a constitutional obligation to ensure that everyone is not deprived, or no one is deprived of the right to water. And the Water Services Act in particular prescribes the amount of water to be issued to people, as well as the rate at which that issuing should occur. We have conducted quite extensive investigations as well as inquiries across the provinces. We released our KZN Water Inquiry report last year. We have recently, in the last 2 weeks, released our Mpumalanga report into local government. And the results are the same across the country. Issues around infrastructure, issues around inefficient management, issues around skills, as well as the politicization of technical competencies. are some of the areas that are plaguing local municipalities.
As far as accountability goes, has anyone been cited? Has there been any action taken against those who are responsible for depriving people of their basic human rights?
That is what we are currently focusing on. We believe that the question of accountability and consequence management is a question that needs a collaborative approach, not only amongst Chapter 9 institutions, but also amongst the institutions that are involved in what we call a constitutional dialogue, including Parliament, including the judiciary. In the course of our work, we are in constant engagement with Parliament in order for them to also then conduct their oversight role in ensuring that they complement our work. We are also in constant engagement with the judiciary, where we are of the view that our recommendations and directives have not been followed by the relevant institutions.
So as the South African Human Rights Commission, you've come under fire from South Africans, broadly speaking, for being, as people will put it, reactionary, waiting too long for things to happen. And there are many examples of those. You know, you speak about moving to focusing on local government within the last 2 years. There are communities in this country who haven't had water, who've had a struggle to access water for well over a decade. So it's not, unthinkable for them to ask, where is the Human Rights Commission when we have to live under these conditions? Where's the Human Rights Commission when human beings have to share water troughs with animals? How does the Commission respond to that?
We understand the concerns of our communities across the country. We have a human rights institution that has a capacity of less than 300 staff members, including commissioners, to task with the protection and the promotion of rights of 60 million people. So some of the issues relate to capacity, and the Commission has a track record of being quite competent regardless of the human resource capacity constraints that we face across our provincial offices in responding effectively and efficiently to the plights in communities. Our focus on local government, even though we have strengthened this focus in the last 2 years, but over the 30 years, we have worked with communities on the ground, also appreciative of our human resource capacity constraints. We work quite closely with civil society, we work quite closely with academic institutions, particularly universities, in communities, in order for us to add to that capacity.
But would you say that, you owe an apology to those communities whose rights have been trampled upon under your watch as the South African Human Rights Commission? Because, as you say, you are undercapacitated, but that is not the fault of the South African citizen whose rights are enshrined. Some of these rights are inalienable rights in the Constitution, and yet those rights are not protected.
The apology, Sakina, should come from government. It is the constitutional obligation of government to ensure that there is delivery of services to all communities. Our responsibility is to hold government accountable and to ensure that there's a protection and the promotion of rights. And within the available resources, we have certainly done exceptionally well, and we will continue to do so in protection and as well as in collaboration with communities.
Well, thank you so much, Commissioner Philile Ntuli, who is a commissioner with the South African Human Rights Commission, and highlighting what some of their shortcomings are, and also the capacity constraints that the South African human rights has to operate under. But of course, this is a conversation, and it's about taking stock of 30 years of democracy in South Africa, and of course, 30 years of human rights. Have we done a stellar job in ensuring that all South Africans enjoy those rights as the Constitution had envisioned? Well, with that, it's back to studio.